One of the tools I've put forward that unfortunately hasn't been used yet is the government can buy existing apartment units, right? It costs less to acquire property that already exists, and you can do it much more quickly than building. So purchase existing apartment units, put an affordability covenant on there and an agreement with the owner, and then you have immediately created affordable housing for less than it would ever cost to build new affordable housing. You can do it in every part of the city, so we're not over-concentrating poverty. We have to look at other ideas.
If we can just stop right there, let me ask you. God darn, that sounds like it make a whole lot of sense.
Doesn't it?
You said it hasn't been embraced yet.
Right.
Why? We keep it real here on the Rock
We're going to keep it real. Politics. Sometimes people only like to push forward the ideas that they come up with.
It's evident that he cares. What do you care about? Welcome to the Rock Newman Show. It's the Rock Newman Show.
We are bringing you another segment of the Rock Newman Show 2.0. We appreciate you tuning in. Invite you to tell all of your friends. Invite you to like the Rock Newman shows. Have your friends subscribe to the Rock Newman Show and share all that we do. I am going to get right to our guest today. There is much to talk about. It is Councilman at Large, Robert White from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us, brother.
Good to see you. Been too long.
Yes, it has been. And in case you don't know, Councilman at Large gives you the whole city. You're not to Ward 5 or 2 or 3. You're Councilman at Large, and
everybody
ultimately have responsibility to look after the whole city.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You know what? Before we get into all the work that you've been doing, that you're involved in, so some of the challenges and the triumphs of Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, I was shocked just a few moments ago. I know that when I interviewed you before, you had just had a baby, and it seems like to me that baby would be 2, maybe 3 years at the most. But you said that your baby girl, your oldest, is now 6.5.
Yes, she is.
You also said she gonna be running things.
She is.
Tell me about that.
So my oldest daughter, Madison, was literally born on the campaign trail. My wife found out she was pregnant with Madison just before I resigned my job to run for office. My wife didn't tell me because she knew I wouldn't resign. So whole campaign trail, Madison is in my wife Christy's belly. She's born 2 weeks after I won the primary. Her first political meeting with me, she was about 2 weeks old at Busboys and Poets.
Now, when somebody says starting early, that's starting early.
So, see, this one, I ran for mayor over the summer. If you had run into her, she would have stopped you, looked you in your eyes and said, do you live in D.C.? If you do, you have to vote for my daddy for mayor. And yesterday she was in Chairman Middleton's office with me for a budget meeting.
All right,
and
man.
This girl has a sense of self and empowerment and entitlement. That's going to take her further than I think folks in my generation can go. So I want to continue to encourage and empower her.
Man, that's a heck of a story right there, man. And you see a future that you want to spend as much time as you can making become a reality.
That's right. Both my daughters, whatever they want to do, they're going to change the world.
Yeah.
But wherever they go, I say to folks, look out, because they're going to run the show.
Wow. So, okay, we can start. We can start so many places. I think I want to start here. Something that I don't think it's any exaggeration at this point when we're talking about Washington D.C. to look at the issue of youth violence.
Yeah.
So, I don't think we have to go give chapter and verse about the things that are happening.
Yeah.
Every day or so, there's a shooting. There's a carjacking. There is murder. If you can speak to what you think are the causes and what can be done to turn around, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Not necessarily unique to Washington, D.C., but necessarily a problem. We're talking about D.C. now.
Yeah.
So what are the causes and what are you working on? What's the city working on to try to tamper down and eliminate youth violence?
I'm glad we're starting here. This is one of the most important things we're dealing with in the city right now. The causes, I think, there are a lot of causes, but there are three key causes. Like everything matters, but not everything matters with the same weight. Three key things I think are mental health, housing, and education. On mental health, when these young people are seeing violence around them, on my way driving here, I'm driving through Northwest, Northeast, Southeast, I see black bodies on the sidewalk, laying there, drugged out. Young kids are seeing this too. We're seeing violence in our street. That is having a real impact on these young people. And without the mental health resources and support systems to help them through this, their brains are developing differently. And so they become more subject to the types of things that we are seeing. So we've got to focus on mental health. I'm trying to unlock our mental health pipeline with more people of color. I'm trying to create a free master's in counseling and master's in social work degree program for all DC residents through the University of the District of Columbia.
Oh, say that again.
Huge. I want to open up the pipeline of mental health professionals, particularly people of color. So right now, I'm working to create a free master's in counseling and master's in social work program through the University of the District of Columbia for all DC residents and DC employees. This is the way we get more people with that mental health experience to help our young people in schools, in their families, people experiencing homelessness. We've got to address the mental health crisis.
You know, Robert, and I can only imagine that, you know, you and your team and, you know, folks at city leadership have thought about this. But one of the things that I sense that seems to be historical is that when you talk about mental health, you talk about counseling, you talk about therapy. Black folks are too often resistant.
Yeah.
I often say I have an antique car that I just love. If I try to change the oil on that antique car, I will blow it up. I will destroy it.
Right.
I love it, but I don't know how to fix it.
Right.
You can love one of these youth. Youth might even say that he loves himself, but he doesn't know how to fix his antisocial behavior.
Yeah.
So, on the one hand, that seems so noble. On the other hand, it seems like, that would be a challenge. But I'm surprised to hear you say that. It just seems like something that, if successful, can put people, many more people, into the community to deal with the mental health piece.
That's right. That's right. If we fall and break our arm, we're going to go to a doctor. If we get cut, we're going to seek medical help. We all have mental injuries, all of us. That means we all need help dealing with them. So therapy, counseling, there's not just some people who need it. Everybody needs it. One of the things I'm really inspired by is I see young people talking about this in a way that folks in my generation and your generation didn't or felt like we couldn't. And so now that I'm a black man in a position of power, I try to talk about mental health a lot as well to empower other folks.
Yeah. That's something else that resonates, that I also am hearing youngsters talk about mental health.
That's right. And we got to keep talking about it, normalize it.
Yeah. So, knowing that I was going to speak with you, I spoke to a couple of youngsters. One's 22, one's 18, and I talked to them about, the youth violence. And in their own way, both of them had answers like this. Need more jobs, and need more recreation.
Right. Those are huge. So first of all, when young people say this is what we need, we need to listen, right? Don't tell young people what they need. Listen to them and serve them. I hear the same thing. We've got to meet young people where they are, not just recreation, but the recreation they need. So if we want people doing things that are productive, we've got to give them the things that they're saying they need. They do need recreation. Things like studios, boxing, music. These are things that they need. Recreation centers that won't have enough room for them. If you walk into a lot of rec centers in D.C., the slots are filled up or it's not open right now. We've got to fix that. These are fixable issues. So we've got to be listening to these young people. But they've got to have a strong foundation of education. Right now, we're just not doing a good enough job of educating young people of color. And that's not anything to be ashamed of. We just need to say, all right, what aspects are working? Let's keep doing those. What's not working, let's fix those. So we keep getting better and better. Too often, we want to pat ourselves on the back, pretend that everything's good. Well, that's a recipe for failure. So we've got to be more focused on where we need to improve. And on housing, we're just watching people, particularly people of color, pushed out of this city.
Oh, man, I wanted to bring up, I got over here in big letters. Gentrification.
Yes.
I wanted to bring up that.
Yeah.
It seems to me that there's a Rubik's Cube when it comes to the issue of expanding your tax base, which allow you to provide services and roads and police and all the essential needs of a community.
Yes.
At the same time, being able to maintain the identity of the city. And I don't want to talk in parable or codes. It's white folks coming in and pushing black folks out is sort of one definition of gentrification. How in the world are you trying to address that?
You put it well when you called it a Rubik's Cube. It's not an easy thing. You need a balance. You need businesses to succeed, people with high incomes to put in those taxes so that we can use it on social services, on housing, on protecting folks. But you've got to make sure for the people who are in charge, you've got to make sure you have the right balance. That means understanding your goals, right? You have to start with your goals. So when 20 years ago, Mayor Williams said, we need to expand our tax base so that we can strengthen the city. Well, the goal, unfortunately, was to expand the tax base. It was not necessarily to protect the people who were already here. So what I don't want to do is see us do the same thing again. We need more revenue now. So let's be clear about our goals. We need more revenue. That should be one goal, but we also need to make sure we are protecting the people who are here or people with limited incomes who want to come here. You can do both, but only if you plan to do both. So that's the balance we have to strike. That means we need businesses that are succeeding here, but as they are succeeding and getting any tax dollars or incentives, we need to be pushing them to hire, to train, to mentor, be part of the community. As we attract wealthier people here, we need to make sure we're mindful of the displacement that their presence can have. And so looking at ideas like displacement protection zones or other things. But to make sure as we grow our revenue base, we are doing it for the right reason. We're not bringing in more money to bring in more money. We're bringing in more money so that we can better help and serve people.
So how do you describe, what do you say, displacement incentive zones?
Mm-hmm. Prevention.
Displacement prevention zone. Again, Rubik's Cube, easier said than done.
Right.
What's your thoughts about how to actualize that?
So let me give an example. It might not be the best example because this is an issue where people have a lot of opinions. But just theoretically, let's say the Washington Commanders, our football team, has been in Prince George's County for years. Mm-hmm. Some people want them back in D.C. Well, if they came back to D.C., let's say they came to Ward 8, a new stadium would be wonderful. but it would absolutely attract new residents. It would push up the cost of housing. That would push out people who are here. But let's say we said to the commanders, yes, you could come to Ward 8, but what we are going to do is we're going to limit the maximum increase in taxes or rent increases in the zone around the stadium so that we could bring in the stadium and prevent displacement. So there are tools that we can use, but again, we have to be clear about where we're trying to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When we obviously talk about gentrification, and you're talking about how to allow people to stay in D.C., folks who've just been here forever, and one of the cornerstones of that is affordable housing.
Right.
What is the city doing as it expands its tax base through, this new housing to maintain and to encourage affordable housing?
One major thing we're doing is in prior years up to now, for the past, let's say 8 to 12 years, we've put a lot of money into what we call the Housing Production Trust Fund, but it's the biggest pot of money that we use to develop affordable housing. And so we are trying to build new affordable housing. We have, over the past several years, increased the amount for first-time home buyers. These are things that for renters or people who want to buy homes, help them be able to afford to live in the city. The problem is when you look at the data on displacement, it's clear that these tools aren't working well enough. So we need new tools. One of the tools I've put forward that unfortunately hasn't been used yet is the government can buy existing apartment units, right? It costs less to acquire property that already exists, and you can do it much more quickly than building. So purchase existing apartment units, put an affordability covenant on there and an agreement with the owner, and then you have immediately created affordable housing for less than it would ever cost to build new affordable housing. You can do it in every part of the city, so we're not over-concentrating poverty. We have to look at other ideas.
If we can just stop right there, let me ask you. God darn, that sounds like it make a whole lot of sense.
Doesn't it?
You said it hasn't been embraced yet.
Right.
Why? We keep it real here on the Rock
We're going to keep it real. Politics. Sometimes people only like to push forward the ideas that they come up with. I think we got to be working as a team. And so a lot of ideas that I push, I see sort of die. Converting office buildings into residential units, again, it's more quick. It takes the pressure off our commercial tax base. I've been pushing this since 2016. Folks were laughing at it in 2016. Now everybody's saying, man, we should be doing this. We could have started doing this years ago. And so this speaks to a lack of partnership, I think, between the mayor and the council. And we've all got to take responsibility for fixing that, because people are relying on us to fix things, not to just kind of sit here and throw around ideas, not to just talk about the problems, but to work.
Pride of authorship.
That's right. To fix things. So that's what we have to judge ourselves by. What are we fixing? Not who came up with the idea, but did we make some progress?
Affordable housing, big issue in all major cities. Talk to or share your thoughts with my audience, if you don't mind, of how you think the police department, policing in Washington, D.C. Give us your assessment on, if we did it on a scale from 1 to 10, where you think policing in D.C. is, one, and what things might improve it?
That's a great question. Policing on a scale of 1 to 10, let me give it a 7. I'm going to give it a 7 because I think our chief and a lot of his top brass are trying to do the right thing. The reason that they lose points is, one, because the police are trying to do too much that the police shouldn't have to do. So there are too many distractions. There's no reason why the police, the primary agency that's supposed to keep us safe, should have exclusive jurisdiction over traffic stops. If I turn right on red illegally, that's the same folks that are supposed to stop people from shooting me. Well, I don't think that should be with the police. So they're performing jobs that they shouldn't perform. When there's a mental health crisis in someone's home, the lead agency is the police. That really shouldn't be their job. So I think we have to step back. I think we have to step back from our ideologies, step back from what we've experienced over the past several decades, and ask ourselves, what is it the police should be responsible for? It is responding to public safety issues. But preventing public safety issues is not the police. Traffic stops should not be police. Mental health issues should not be police. If we put those other things with the appropriate agencies, we would see a safer city, we'd see a more productive police force, and we would see less unnecessary altercations between residents and police.
Bro, you're making a whole lot of sense. I'm a country boy. I grew up in Southern Maryland, and it's like, we would plant a vegetable and water it, weed it, and give it sunlight. Simple things, and all of a sudden, we get a big bush of string beans.
Yeah.
With common sense kind of approaches
That's
to
right.
what we were doing. And that's what I feel like you're communicating here. Do you feel, then let me ask this question. In terms of what is happening with the council and with the mayor's office, setting policy, executive branch, what should both be doing that would be more effective?
One, communicating, and two, let me give a shout out to Janetta Rose Barris. I don't agree with everything she writes, but when she's on, she's on. Her most recent piece suggested that the government needed to get back to basics. And I think that was the right call for the council and the mayor. When we had budget surpluses year after year after year, the city just got less disciplined about examining what works and what are the core responsibilities of government. Can we make sure the government is doing the basic things right? Education, public safety, housing, jobs. So if we come together and say, let's get back to the core, if we agree, the executive and the council, on what the key goals, key objectives of the city are, then we can be shooting at the same target. We can be debating about the path to that target instead of debating everything under the moon and being scattershot, unfocused. Everybody got their pet projects. Let's come together on what the key issues are and then start debating the ideas that get us there.
So DC has what appears to be a unique position and policy in terms of homelessness. I mean, I hear pardon me, I hear the talk about when it gets to a certain temperature, DC, unlike a lot of other major cities, has a certain mandated responsibility to make sure homeless folks have some place to stay.
Yeah.
And when they're staying there, to get fed.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the homeless issue and what you see as some of the challenges and what you see as some of the progress.
So let me start with the progress. I think DC, there's always more you can do. But DC for homeless people does more than probably any jurisdiction. There's a right to shelter when we reach certain cold temperatures. With that right to shelter comes a right to food. We have shelters. We're rebuilding our shelters in a way that is much better than what we had before. Mayor Bowser has created family shelters. They're smaller so that people get more services, get more privacy. We have made a lot of progress there. What we need to do a lot better is, one, get people out of homelessness. So we have enough housing vouchers for almost everybody who's homeless in our city, but we have a backlog in our system of years. You see people living outside for 2 years after they've been approved for housing. That's a bureaucracy issue. We have to fix that. And we also have to be more humane with how we handle homeless people. So when I go talk to people who are homeless, what I find is a whole lot of people who remind me of me. They're black, they grew up in DC. They have hit some hurdles in their lives. Unlike me, when they tripped, they didn't have somebody to catch them. They didn't have a net to fall into. And so they ended up homeless where the rest of us got help to pick ourselves back up. So when people are homeless and our system is so broken that we can't get people into housing, and we are closing tent encampments, coming in with dump trucks and law enforcement, we make that issue worse. Because the same people who are saying we're here to help you are the same ones showing up with dump trucks and law enforcement. And to most people, that don't make sense. Those two things can't coexist. So once you shuffle them along somewhere else, they're going to be a lot more resistant to your offers of help in the future. That makes homelessness worse, not better. So if we take a more compassionate approach, we're going to see less homelessness in DC.
Education. There's been a lot of criticism. A lot of criticism. Education in the nation's capital. Some of it comes from, some uninformed congressional persons and uninformed senators who like to use D.C. and other urban areas as a dartboard, just to throw darts at. Give us your assessment of where we are, education, pre-K through high school, college, and some ideas that you might have that would improve where we are.
Yeah. We made a lot of progress in the administration of education, keeping the buses running on time over the past several years. We've made a lot of progress. I've worked very hard on this. Councilmember Vincent Gray has worked very hard on this to expand early childhood education, because that's when most of the brain development happens, age 0 to 3. So getting more educational opportunities for young people. Where we need to make progress is the business community jumped into education about a decade and a half ago and said, look, we don't like where things are. We want to get involved to improve things. But at this point, the best arguments for what we're doing in education is things are better than they were 15 years ago. But no business would use that as their business model for success. If we look at what measurements we would use, how many students are doing better than they were 15 years ago. Well, by demographic, they're not doing a lot better, but we're spending a lot more money. We spend over $2 billion a year on public education. 31% of students are proficient in English and language arts, 17% in math. That math doesn't make sense. So instead of saying, hey, we're going to stick where we are and get involved in these ideological debates, folks need to come forward and say, look, we are not where we need to be. We are not getting the bang for our buck, and we need to stop being sensitive about where we're not doing right. Let's just admit it. Everything isn't going well, and things particularly are not going well for students of color. So we've got to have some hard internal conversations. I think we got to get a lot more comfortable with criticism in government, with checking our work, with talking to each other, because at the end of the day, a lot of people are counting on us to make progress. I have 2 little girls. My wife and I are going to make sure those little girls are going to be okay. But a lot of young people, a lot of families are depending entirely on us in positions of power and influence to make sure our school system ensures that their kids can do better than the parents. That's our obligation to these young people. And if we don't do that well, we're going to pay for it generation after generation.
Man, that was a startling statistic. You said 31% are proficient
In English.
in English, 17% in math.
That's right.
Those are damning numbers.
They are.
It reminds me, probably was 30 years ago, as a graduate of Howard University, I came back and talked about, there was a meeting about what was going on with the athletic department. And, people went around the room and everybody kind of was high-fiving. And when it got to me, I was like, damn. I don't want to be disruptive, but I want to speak to the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room, that all the athletic teams are, for the most part, pitiful. And if the athletic teams are pitiful, I don't think we should be patting each other on the back
Right.
and applauding a pitiful job.
Right.
We need to do something about this. So to your point, man, recognizing those statistics, it seems to me it's like, damn right. There needs to be, put on some thick skin, deal with the criticism. The elephant in the room that's ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any particular specific ideas about addressing that?
I do. I have a lot. First, we have to invest a lot more in early childhood education. I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I cannot underscore what the science says and what the data say about the return on investments for early childhood education. The majority of brain development happens from 0 to 3. So all the rest of your life, a lot of that is built on that 0 to 3 foundation. So we've got to invest more there. There are a lot of really great things happening in our schools, in some of our traditional DC public schools and some of our charter schools. For a while, we were in a place where we were saying we're going to learn from who's doing it the best, but we moved away from that. So we've got to do that. But the other thing is, you cannot improve schools without teachers. Teachers are leaving in droves. We have one of the highest teacher turnover rates in the country, and it's going up. So as long as you have teachers cycling out every 2 years, you're just not going to have a stable school system. So I introduced a teacher retention bill. Listen to teachers. Teachers said, these are the top things we need to stay in the classroom. My bill takes those things and just puts them in the law, says this is what we're trying to do. Focusing on their mental health, giving them time to coordinate and collaborate, many other things, mental health days for our teachers. But we also have to keep great teachers in the classroom. Some people who love being in the classroom, but there's only so much you can make as a classroom teacher. So people who want to be in the classroom and should be go into the administration because they can make more money. Well, most important jobs in our city are in the classrooms. So what can we do to keep those great teachers in the classrooms? We've got to do that. Those are some of the starting points, but really it requires us to listen to each other and for people to admit none of us have all the answers. We need to come to the table again, get out of our bunkers, get away from our ideologies, and start thinking about and talking about what actually is working.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with Steve Francis, the basketball player from Maryland, went to Houston, the franchise, and he was lamenting one day about how hard his life was, after he had just flown on the private plane to the arena. He's just signed his deal with Reebok, and he was living really the life of luxury. Yeah. And I said, man, shut up. I think right after mom and dad, the most important influence in a child's life is a teacher.
Yes.
And a good teacher can make such a huge difference. I happen to think that, and I'll be willing to testify, but I think teachers should be paid, just across the board. I think it should be a way found to pay teachers more, and perhaps a lot more.
Yeah.
Good, especially good teachers.
That's right. That's right. I mean, Steve Francis, incredible basketball player, right?
Yeah.
Some people are equally talented in the classroom. I'm not, right? I shouldn't be in anybody's classroom.
Yeah.
But some of these teachers, what I see them do in the classroom, including my daughter's teachers, phenomenal. We should be tripping over ourselves, throwing money at these folks to keep doing what they're doing. I think you're absolutely right. I think it would change who can stay in those professions.
Yeah.
We generally attract them, but we can't keep them. And that's what we have to fix.
Been in the news a lot lately about Washington, D.C. and the mayor's comments pardon me, the mayor's comments about increasing the number of traffic cameras in D.C. by like 300 or so. Is that, I know, you ran for mayor, you all competed.
Yeah.
Is that something you're in favor of or against?
Oh, I would have to ask why, right? So we had in our region 313 traffic fatalities in the past year.
In the region?
In the region, in this area, despite an increase in traffic cameras and fines. So what I want to see is not traffic cameras. I want to see something that is going to reduce the number of people dying because they're being hit by cars or involved in accidents. I have not seen the connection. I see an overconcentration of traffic cameras in minority neighborhoods. I see traffic cameras giving tickets to out-of-state drivers who aren't paying them. What I'm not seeing is a reduction in fatalities. So I want to see how this proposed increase in traffic cameras is going to lead to fewer fatalities. Again, the goal. That's the goal. So show me the math. Show me the line between these increased numbers of cameras and fewer people dying, and you got my support. We put 1,000 new cameras up if it's going to keep more people alive. But if it's not going to do that, then what is the point? So I need to see the work there.
Yeah. Have you offered any suggestions or got any ideas about how to decrease the number of deaths through traffic?
Yes, I think there have been ideas raised by the mayor. There have been ideas raised by council members. Things like raising crosswalks so that they're more noticeable. We do see, unfortunately, too many people dying in crosswalks. There are places in the city where we need to and have reduced the speed limit. I think we need to be less resistant to speed bumps in residential neighborhoods. I always have residents asking for stop signs and speed bumps, and I used to be one of those residents. You know what it took for me to get a stop sign in my old neighborhood? I had to become a council member. I led my local community association for years, begging for a stop sign. DDOT just wouldn't give us one. Eventually, I became a council member. I talked to the mayor. I said, Mayor, can we please get a stop sign here? Finally got one, a block from a junior high school. So desperately needed place. But there are some really simple things that we can do: speed bumps, raised crosswalks, more stop signs. But we also can look at what's happening in other parts of the country. There's some countries that have drastically reduced pedestrian deaths. Switzerland is one of them. We have to be studying what they're doing and adopting it here.
Let me ask you. You mentioned earlier. You said when you sort of might have fallen by the wayside, you had someone to catch you. So, folks, my guest today is Councilman at Large for Washington, D.C., Robert White. And what I want to ask you is if you can give me a little bit of your journey, because it intrigued me that, I might have fallen by the wayside, but I had people to catch me. So what's your background? Talk to me about that.
So I grew up here. My parents were high school sweethearts at Wilson High School. They divorced when I was young, when I was about 4. That had an impact on me. My mom developed breast cancer and passed when I was 8. That had a significant impact on me.
Wow.
About 3 weeks after that, I was in a near-fatal car accident on the way to school. That's where the scar on my head comes from. My skull was split open, my mouth collapsed. I was medevaced to the hospital. I was out of school for over a month. This was in 3rd grade. I failed the 3rd grade, couldn't catch up. I failed every single grade from 3rd grade until my junior year of high school. And along the way, a lot of teachers, one of my guidance counselors told me I would never go to college and I would not be successful academically.
So you failed each year?
Every single year. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th.
So folks, I want to take a moment here. So, you out there with a kid that's struggling in school. I had no idea of that.
Yeah.
That's a story right there. it speaks to not giving up. And I won't tell his story, Councilman's story. Please continue.
What I did have was a father, Robert Sr., a family, and an extended family, particularly at my church, St. Augustine's, and my godmother, Monica Gray, who wrapped around me and just wouldn't let go. You know, as a lot of the world was telling me what I wouldn't be and couldn't do, there were a couple people who said, I believe in you. Not a lot of teachers, but a couple of my teachers and one principal said, you know, Robert, I think you're better than what people say about you. And not everybody, I didn't have a lot of people who believed in me, but I had a few. Some people don't have any.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to have the support system that I have, and I wouldn't be here without them.
Yeah. The councilman just talked about a support system, and those of you who are listening, you know, by and large, I think most of you are indeed in a position to be able to influence a kid's life. You know, I do this program because, you know, as I said much earlier, I hope to inspire you, you know, to do things and to improve your life. I want you to hear and pay particular attention to what Councilman White just said. Councilman at large for Washington, D.C., Robert White just said. He failed his classes 5th grade, 4th grade, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, when the easy thing to do would have been, okay, he's a knucklehead, we're going to write him off or whatever. Folks, if you're talking about trying to improve your community, improve your family, we just can't give up on. We can't give up on our youth. Put your arms around them, love them, help them. That's quite an inspirational. I just didn't know that, and I would have never thought it. So then you went on to do what?
So 4 years after my guidance counselor in high school told me I wouldn't go to college, I was studying at Oxford University. So once I got my groove and I believed in me, you couldn't stop me. But also I learned work ethic. You know, I learned that I had to work harder than other people to move at the pace that they were moving. Well, eventually I just learned how to outwork most people, and I kept working, and then I would just, you know, keep leveling up. So the struggle taught me a lot, but the most important thing is it taught me that all the things I've been able to do, study abroad, go to law school, be, you know, successful in politics, I'm not that special, right? And so when I look at other young people in this city, I say, man, if I could do this, only imagine what they can do if they have the right supports, if they have encouragement. And so I take my work very personally because I believe that the potential in young people is so high, but they just have to have an opportunity. And I'm just trying to make sure I create an opportunity for other people so that they can see what they can do.
Before we wrap up here, the position that you're in as a council member, policymaker, the easy thing to do, and what seems most often to happen, is for you guys to get criticism, because it's a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
you know, a lot of responsibility, people being impacted. So I'd like to ask you, one, what do you feel has been your biggest challenge as a policymaker, as being as a council member? What's been the biggest challenge? And what are you most thankful for? What's been your greatest joy?
Biggest challenge is focus. I want to cover every gap. I want to help every person. If you do too much, you don't do anything well. Yeah. And I've had to learn discipline, and I'm still learning it, to focus so that I'm making deep impact and not just scattershot everywhere. And that is a challenge for me that I work on every day. My greatest joy, let me give two. One is passing a bill, and this came from returning citizens. This wasn't my idea. They came to me and said, we need to restore voting rights for incarcerated people. So we worked together to pass a bill that made the District of Columbia the first jurisdiction in the nation to restore voting rights to all incarcerated people. So let me ask you, so they came to you, okay, and then you took their issue
And how did you make it come alive?
So returning citizens are a priority of mine because when I got elected into office, as I was going through college and law school, my brother was going through his challenges through incarceration. And I didn't like what I saw in that process. So when I got into office, I focused a lot on returning citizens. They saw that I would listen to them and get things done. And they said, okay, we have the next challenge for you. We want to restore voting rights for incarcerated people. I took a deep breath and said, all right, let's figure this out. So what I did, the process was research, understanding. I'm a lawyer. I know Constitution doesn't take away voting rights from incarcerated people. So I wanted to understand when and why it happened. It happened in response to emancipation of black people and voting rights for black people. So state after state after state, as black slaves were freed and as black men got the right to vote, were increasing the number of penalties to incarcerate black people and removing the rights of incarcerated people to vote. And so I helped other people understand that history, and then we got momentum. So that was the process for getting that done. But
I'll give you a high five on that, man. that right. See, boy, there got to be an effort put on the foot to multiply that around the country.
Yeah.
I know there are legislatures, all around throughout the South that will fight against that. But what we're talking about there is just pure racism.
It is. And the impacts are so profound, right? Because elected officials listen to people who vote. So if prisons are not serving people well for rehabilitation or mental health, if the folks in there don't have a vote, then they can't hold anybody accountable. They can't push their agenda. That's why the right to vote in a democracy is the most important right. And in a democracy, when people get incarcerated, they don't lose most of their constitutional rights. So the idea that they would lose the most fundamental democratic right, the right to vote, just doesn't make any sense. It is absolutely pure racism. And now it's so deeply rooted, people just assume there's some connection between being incarcerated and not being able to vote. And there's no logical connection.
What do you see in your future?
I'm gonna keep doing good work. My wife has given me the green light to run for mayor again, so that's on the table. I plan to run for re-election for the council in 2 years, so that's what I'm focused on. But no matter how long I'm in this space, at some point I'm gonna have to look back and be accountable for the things I got done that didn't get done. So whatever position I'm in, whether it's council, mayor, or anything else, my job is to make sure I'm getting things done and helping people. Get things done and helping people. That might be the answer to the question that I wanted to ask. And that is, your trajectory took you through university, took you through law school, you became a lawyer. And undoubtedly, if you were in private practice, you could make more money than what you're making right now. Undoubtedly. Yeah.
Probably a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Why have you chosen public service?
I love what I do. I feel so blessed to be able to do what I do. I'm in a job where I can help people in a very real way. And money is important. Fulfillment is important too. So I want to make sure that I do work that's fulfilling, and this work is fulfilling.
Thank you very much, man, for
Thanks,
joining the Rock Newman Show 2.0.
You,
Folks, you just heard from Councilman at Large for Washington, D.C., Robert White. Thank you so much for joining us here at Rock Newman Show 2.0. We'll see you the next time, and you got to come back again, man.
I'll be back, brother.
Yeah, you got a lot of good stuff to say. Appreciate you. Namaste.